This draft season, we're going to be trying something a bit different with the PRs and doing it recording rather than the write-ups, thinking that it might save a bit of time, but also hopefully provide a bit more insight into how we come to these decisions. Just going to be me doing, I guess, the write-ups slash video this time around. Maybe might get someone else outsource the PR for my own team. But yeah, this is truth, and I'm going to go through Armarouge first. So sort of how this is going to look is I've got the prep doc that I assume most of us use up, and I'm just going to sort of compare the teams one by one. These aren't like the actual matchups or anything like that. I've just slotted in all of Armarouge, and then all the other Cerulean Edge teams are, I think, from team 6 through to 10, which we'll do separately. And how I've sort of got it at the moment, I've put all the team logos, or if I couldn't find a team logo, such as for Goosefragger here, just Discord icons or whatever. And I'm going to slot them sort of into like an A, B, C. I'm presuming I'm probably going to have it ordered still between tiers. So say if like, you know, Skate and Sleepy's team here, if this was the actual ranking, would be above T and Kanave's team, if that's how you pronounce that. So yeah, this is sort of how it's going to work. I've got this open just in case I forget the icons, but we're mainly going to be going off of this. Yeah, and throughout the course of this, I haven't really had like a fantastic look at each of the teams. I also haven't watched any of the replays so far, so that wouldn't influence, I guess, any of my perspectives. Yeah, so it might not be like maybe as well thought out as the PRs, because sometimes we do the write-ups and we spend a long time mulling over our words, so this is more so going to be more of a first look kind of thing. I'll try and have timestamps as well, so if people only want to see what I say about their specific team, or sort of want to skip to the end and see where the teams rank up, I'll try and have that timestamped. I'm probably going to have everyone preliminary ranked as well, so say if I put a team here, it might end up, you know, moving between tiers as the video goes on. Starting off though is Sleepy and SkateZ's team. Pretty sure, right? Yep. So they've drafted a pretty strong core, I would say. So I usually just try and look at this. It makes my life a little bit easier. No dragon, but they have a strong fairy and steel in Treads and Sylveon. I think that I like the Rillaboom plus Sneasel combo as well. Quite aggressive, but everyone does know just how bad Sneasel is in Sword Draft leagues historically, so I fear that Sleepy and SkateZ might be going 0-6 just off of that pick alone. In all seriousness, they did do a few trades. So they dropped Coco, Knucklestack, Vileplume, Morgrem, Dashbun, grabbed Spectra, Rillaboom, Dragonair, Mine, and Porygon. Yeah, so I guess the first thing to note is just sort of they essentially kind of only have 8 Pokemon. Like, sure they have 11, but I don't really think... I don't know Porygon's stats, but yeah, they're pretty, like, mediocre. Dragonair, we've seen T, and I don't know whether they were paired with the worst or someone else when Dragonair was run, but that I think was decently effective. I'm not sure if Sleepy and SkateZ will be pulling that out in a match, but I suppose that's possible. And then Minun, again, it's decent speed tier, I guess, for a 1-pointer, and it's Terra Captain. Maybe with Terra Ice it can do something. What am I looking for? Setup, I think. Well, I can't remember where to find it. There we go. Does it get Nasty Plot, or is that just like a Radical Red thing? No, it does. So maybe that could be like a random 1-point pick if Electric Ice coverage is really good. Overall, their trades, I think, yeah, they're probably better. Like, I kind of would say I rate Coco plus Sneasel a bit more than Rillaboom plus Sneasel, just because I think Coco's just a better Pokemon in general. But they did pick up a whole Spectria, so that's kind of pretty nuts. I think the trades have probably been beneficial. So yeah, while I do value probably Coco plus Sneasler combination more than I would say Rillaboom plus Sneasler. I do think that the trades are beneficial because they were also able to pick up a Spectre for getting rid of like a couple of lower tier picks that I don't think amount to as big of a, like as strong of a pick as Spectre is. As far as this team's concerned, don't let the averages fool you. They're kind of brought down by these shitters down the bottom, and Oricorio's generally poor stats. I think that offensively, it's quite strong. I think that most teams will have to worry a lot about Spectre sweeps. Ghost in general is just really strong. I find that most teams, I mean, we look over here, you know, Ghost weakness. Like, I imagine as we go through all of the teams across the board, you'll probably see a lot of them have a Ghost weakness. So I think Spectre is quite strong in that aspect. I also like Spectre with the grassy terrain support. There's often a lot of games where you can go a more tanky variety of Spectre with, say, Substitute, Leftovers, Can't Mind. With terrain support, that just becomes a little bit more annoying to deal with. And I also like Mandibuzz backing these guys up as well. It's always been quite a solid pick, and it's kind of like a decent generalist. A lot of Sleeping SkateZ's picks, they're mainly aggressive, like Spectre, Sneasler, Rillaboom. You know, you need some sort of tanks to back them up, and Mandibuzz can go either Fizz Def or defense, so it's sort of quite malleable in that aspect. Same with Sylveon, although it's more, you know, pushed towards that Spadef side. I guess just at a glance, Oricorio has always been a good Terra Captain, but my issue, I guess, this season is that it's technically the weakest it's ever been, just because everyone can kind of do what Oricorio does this season, so it's not as unique in how it operates. I'm not quite sure why Treads is highlighted here. I have to assume that, yeah, Treads is not a Terra Captain here. If they had Terra Treads, that'd be pretty strong. But alas, they don't. The other three Terra Captains, I mean, they kind of just had to pick them. They had no other choices. There's no, like, you pick, unless they went, I guess, Terra Keldeo, maybe that could have been okay, or Terra Sylveon. But picking Oricorio is still probably the correct choice. But these other three aren't really anything to write home about. Z Rillaboom I also think is not the best. I think that Keldeo or even Sneasler would have appreciated it more. I know Sneasler doesn't get the Unburden boost from popping a Z Crystal, so it's probably not brought as much, but it can still be a decent nuke when required. In terms of hazards, their hazards are really lacking. It's just Iron Treads for the rocks, Sneasler for the T-Spikes, which realistically isn't going to get brought particularly often. Pretty much any time there's a grounded poison on the enemy side of the field, you're probably not running T-Spike Sneasler. It's not the greatest loss, but you would generally prefer to have some sort of extra rocker, extra spiker maybe. In terms of defog, I think, and removal in general, I think Treads plus Mandibuzz is fine. As I sort of said earlier, they really only have 8 Pokemon to work with. Maybe 9 if you count Dragonair, or like these guys might come like 1 game out of the 6 prior to playoffs. So realistically, you should always have either Mandibuzz or Iron Treads in the top 6 anyways, to be able to remove those hazards. In saying that, their team's not like especially weak to rocks, which is good. In fact, I feel like a lot of teams usually have this red rather than green, so that's beneficial to these guys as well. And one of those reds is Oricorio as well, who is going to just terrestrialize away from being weak to rock. Overall, how I feel about this team, I think it's got some strong points, definitely. I think Spectre plus Sneasler is going to be an annoying combination to deal with. The sort of, sweeping potential and the speed tiers are quite nice here. I just am not sure if this team has enough sort of defense that'll allow Spectre and Sneasler to be facilitated in their sweeps or their, breaking power. overall, defensively, you know, there's some common weaknesses, so ice is going to be a bit tricky for these guys to deal with. Your steel type not being resistant to ice here is a bit unfortunate, I would say, especially one that has somewhat lopsided defenses like treads. Maybe you can get away with like an AV if it's really required, but Keldeo being the only ice resist is a little unfortunate. Flying at the treads, again, hopefully it's able to hold it down here, but it's the only realistic flying resist. And kind of the same with Fairy, but I guess I do also have to remember that Oricorio can maybe become a steel type or something like that. Start boosting its Spitef, and then all of a sudden you have like an extra like pseudo resist, I guess. Outside of what I've already mentioned, I think that Sleeping SkateZ are probably going to have to rely quite a bit on either like Spectria just breaking things down so that Sneeze is able to sweep, or maybe like a Grassy Glide sweep, or they're going to just have to run like setup on most of their dudes. So set up Sneasler, set up Spectria. But I think against teams that have like strong defensive answers, especially into Sneasler, there's like a decent amount, it's going to be really hard for Sleepy and SkateZ to break through. Sneasler can help Spectra, you know, break it down, dark types that it otherwise wouldn't enjoy, same with normal types, so it's a good pairing there. But I do worry that, you know, if there's something to get rid of terrain, or if there's, I don't know, certain haze mons, or just generally tanks that do well into the sweepers, I don't think the defensive core of this team is going to be able to pick up the slack. I haven't really talked about Sylveon too much. It's decent here, like a fairy's needed, it's always a good type to have. I don't know if like a Wisher is as good with this team. It's not really like super bulky. Like wishing into Spectria is alright. I mean, Spectria can probably tank a hit and you can just hard switch it in maybe. Treads appreciates Wish. Mandibuzz as well a bit, but in general I think that it's going to be a little bit trickier than just sort of like wishing into some sort of mega tank. But, you know, say like I look next door here at this like Tinglu, for example, like wishing into Tinglu here just to skip ahead a little bit is, you know, a lot more threatening, say, than wishing into Mandibuzz or wishing into Spectria or Treads. But it's still appreciated, definitely still appreciated. And I think the grassy terrain will also help out a lot, especially for Treads who's weak to the ground types. Sneasler, it might be able to live EQs, it's not like, it's still pretty frail, but it might be able to live something. And, you know, kill something back, maybe like a Heatran Earth Power or something like that. But yeah, overall, at this stage, I'll just double check down here to make sure I haven't like really missed anything. Momentum's quite good on this team, I will say. Ignoring sort of these two for the most part. But considering these 5 Pokemon are probably going to show up like to every game, maybe 5 out of 6 games, same with Sylveon, getting Baton Pass, I think having all of your guys have Pivot is really helpful. And I think it's really necessary. Because, you know, things like Spectria or Sneasler that's trying to SD, they all really appreciate U-turn support to be able to get their job done. At the moment, I'm going to put this team here. Top 1, bottom 1 at the moment as it stands. This might shift as I sort of get a better idea of what's going on with the other teams. I've already sort of spoken about Sleeping SkateZ for quite a while, so I'll try and cut down maybe, so this video doesn't go too long. But yeah, next up is T and Kanave. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Could be Kanave, but I'm sure I'll be corrected at some point. I've talked at length to T about this team, just in DMs and all that, and the one thing that has always stood out to me is just how bulky it is. Like, I don't think it's often that you get a team that has like almost half the Pokemon with a base HP of 100 or higher. So just before we start, they did also make some trades, this team, dropping Delcatty and Drampa for Chimecho and Kamala, which fairly like lower end trades, not quite as like high profile trades as Sleepy and SkateZ made. I think Kamala is a decent Pokemon. I also think Drampa suited their team quite well, so I'm relatively indifferent about the trades overall. I think Chimecho does help with a couple things that, say, Delcatty as the sort of quote-unquote meme pick might not have. So yeah, sort of just starting with the captains, I think Z-Moth is quite good. I know T wanted to run Z-Feeny this season, but I think Moth is just the correct choice. It's always just quite threatening in team preview. You know, obviously if Moth shows Booster in the middle of the match, you know that it's not going to flick Z, but if it doesn't show Booster, then you always just have to be worried, and it can get out of control very quickly. I think Glastria is also a decent Terra Captain. With or without Trick Room support doesn't really matter. I think the ability for it to Terra Blast this season really helps shore up a lot of its issues that it maybe has had in prior seasons. Because even defensively, like, if you get this thing away from being an Ice type, and make it either, you know, Spadef or FizzDev tank, those are absolutely ridiculous stats. If this thing could recover, or if it could like set up rocks or something, it would definitely be a couple points higher. And that's not even considering this gigantic attack stat too, which I think will come in clutch versus a lot of teams, because Ice is often something that a lot of teams aren't really that prepared for. So if Glastria is able to, you know, Terrastalize and have Bolt Beam coverage or Fire coverage or something like that, it's really going to be a pain in the ass to deal with. Drifblim's also solid as well. I really like Drifblim. I've seen some recent replays of Drifblim absolutely popping off. It's just a good Pokemon, I think, especially for its point range. And I think Chimecho as the other Terra Captain here, yeah, it's fine. I think, what is it, 2-pointer? Yeah, so it makes sense to have. In terms of just going back to the base HP, it's supplemented by Wish support from Screamtail. So I guess one of like the main criticisms I have of, you know, Pokemon like Tinglu, it's an obvious one, but they can't heal. Screamtail being paired with Tinglu though is very frightening, and will just be a pain in the ass to deal with. Same with Feeny, it can't heal natively. Well, all of a sudden it now has Screamtail support as well, Wish support. Annihilate gets Wish support, all of a sudden you hit it a couple times, Rage Fist counter builds up, Annihilate leaves, gets wished back up, and it's now back to 100% health, and it has like an 150 base power Ghost physical move to hit you with. It makes this seem really threatening, in ways that I think maybe just like to glance at, it's maybe, you know, not as conventional maybe. Some of these guys have been like picked a lot, like Tinglu, Screamtail, Moth. Others not so much. Annihilate, Genesect. Annihilate's only been picked a couple times, and Genesect's obviously new. Glastria, I can't remember the last time it was picked either. But I think all these guys kind of work well together to make sort of one holistic picture, one holistic team. Yeah, so I've talked about the captains. I think the speed tiers on this team are a little bit dodgy. So Screamtail being your fastest is like, it's fine. Base 111 speed Encore is decent, if you can afford to give up the defenses. Base 110 Moth is alright, but it's nothing to write home about, I guess. Like, we've criticized Kivs and Lucas in the past for having a team that had speed tiers just like this. I'm pretty sure they made it to semi-finals that season, so like, it's not the biggest deal, but it's definitely something to keep in mind, especially when Genesect can't run a Scarf. You know, with how this team works, like Scarf Annihilate's still fine, but maybe you would prefer it to be a bit bulkier to get those wishes. Scarf Moth, like maybe, but you probably just want to run Booster. So it's just sort of something that T and Kanave are going to have to keep in mind, that a lot of the time their opponents are just going to be faster than them. Feeny support's really solid. I think Feeny with JamestheKatt is quite nice, stopped it from getting burnt or flame bodied or things like that on U-turn switches. Feeny plus Glastria is also nice for the same reason, same for Annihilate. And I think in general, like, it's double fairy, sure, double defensive fairy, sure, but I don't think that really is too big of an issue. It's not like the team is like super weak into poison, it's not like the team is super weak into steel or anything like that. So I don't think that double fairy is like an issue here. You know, stacking a really good type is probably a decent plan, honestly. JamestheKatt, I'm interested to see how this guy goes. I think it's the kind of Pokemon I would think that T would be good at using, just because, like, you don't really know what it's going to do, even though it's locked to only having the drives. I think it gets like enough moves where it's a very malleable Pokemon. And there's lots of different things that it is able to do. Like, even if it's a physical set with shift gear, maybe you just run Techno Blast Ice as well, and all of a sudden it's unwallable. So I think that should be a strong combination. In terms of the type profile, I do think that as bulky as this team is, they're just going to have to worry or just keep a track on super effective moves. Like, for example, there's not really many, like, say, fire resists, not really many ghost resists or rock resists. There's like a few key typings, like flying especially here. Granted, flying's not like the best offensive type in terms of like just move distribution wise, so they might be able to get away with it. But it's just something they're going to have to be cognizant of, because if, say, for example, like Tapu Fini gets knocked out early, then all of a sudden whoever the fire type is just going to have a field day. Or if, you know, Tinglu gets knocked out early, then all of a sudden the opposing Spectria, who knows, might start going gangbusters. Hazards wise, a team with Tinglu is always going to be fine with hazards. Secondary Rocker as Screamtail's fine. Tertiary Rocker as Annihilate, maybe that gets brought a game or two. Also decent option. And then you also have T-Spikes on Moth, which, like, it's okay. I think it more probably... It can afford to run it more than maybe some other offensive poison types, but it's still probably not going to happen too often. And then in terms of removal, I think there's 5 options. Realistically, it's probably mainly Feeny or Eldegoss who's running that removal. Yeah, like, maybe you would prefer to have like a slightly higher tier removalist alongside Feeny. But there's enough options to where surely one of these 4 guys can pick up the slack if necessary in each matchup. They're all different types, they're all like kind of do different things, so presumably one of the 4 is always going to be usable in a matchup if needed. And knowing how T usually likes to mess around with the lower tiers, they'll definitely be coming in some capacity, and probably not to remove hazards. Wish support I've talked about. Heal Bell, aromatherapy, always nice to have. Momentum's okay. I think that, I mean, Pingu and I, we're usually like, you know, we love momentum, so I feel like maybe we rate that a little bit higher than maybe other teams do. Realistically, like, Moth and Annihilate probably aren't U-turning every match. Baton's decent here, but I think in general, the momentum could definitely be a fair bit better. But in saying that, when you have guys like Tinglu and Screamtail, etc., maybe you can just hard switch your guys in and just be completely okay, because the team is so damn bulky. A lot of different disruption they can do as well. I think the phasing's solid too. And in terms of, I mean, I don't know why setup's all the way down here, but they have decent setup as well. Like, Glastria can wall break, Annihilate can set up if required, gears can be shifted from... Oh, sorry, not that, but yeah. This guy can boost his speed as well if required. Feeney can do a bunch of different things too, so they've definitely got options for breaking through teams. At the present, I mean, I do like this team. I think it's solid. I think it has like a few issues just with like typing and momentum and speed tiers. So I think I'll put it here just for now. I imagine it might end up moving like somewhere down here. But I still think it's a relatively strong team. So we'll just move to the next teams. I think this is Times. Yeah, that looks like Times' team. So returning to the draft league for the first time in a couple seasons. Times has put together a pretty solid team, I'd say. I quite like it just to sort of look at it. I think these three, I don't know why, they just seem like a strong core, just to eyeball. Natdex was the first pick for Times. Clearly he wanted to prioritize it over some of the newer guys, which is fair enough. And I think it does provide a lot of strong wall breaking power just up front. I'm pretty sure it's always done well every single time it's drafted. It's just been one of those picks that historically in Sword Draft League always gets the playoffs. It always racks up quite a lot of kills, gets close to kill leader. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens again, especially because Times prioritized it, so I imagine he's probably building around the Natdex in mind. So being able to facilitate its success. In terms of the Terra captains and the Z captains, the Z captain is pretty dog shit, but I don't think Times really had a better option, and I think he even said that in like Draft General or something when it came to picking the captains, that he wasn't really drafting with Z captain in mind, which fair enough. Slowbro, I mean, I think Z Slowbro was run once by Mercurial in Season 3 on like a Trick Room team. I don't think it was particularly successful. Will Times be able to do better? Probably. Will it be that much better? I think that the Z Crystal is probably staying in the backpack for most of the games. Terra Captains though are very strong, I think. I think Frostmoth has a lot of potential. I can't remember. Yeah, 7-point Terra Captain for Frostmoth feels quite good. I imagine that it can probably steal games, and just it's in general like Frostmoth struggles to get enough boosts to be able to do something while also not having the coverage to be able to do something. I think Terra allows it to both get more boosts defensively, but also have that one coverage move that it often needs. So, like, Ice usually covers a fair bit, you know, Bug and Grass, yeah, they're alright, they maybe cover, like, Water types or Psychic types or something, respectively. But it's really that Terra Electric, that Terra Fire, you know, Terra Ground, things like that that'll really help the Frostmoth succeed. I think Scrafty is also a good secondary captain. It's obviously held back quite a bit by its typing. Yeah, Terra just allows it to either set up more with Dragon Dance or become a more threatening tank even. It's got a good defensive spread. So there's a couple different ways to play that. And then finally Ampharos, might as well terrestrialize it realistically with these two. Also being captains, I don't think you bring Terra Ampharos that much, but if there's a good game for it, there's a good game for it, right? So that might be something that Times looks into 1 or 2 times. In terms of the speed tiers, I like the top end of things, but I think it does clump a bit, especially around like the Nidoqueen Klefki area. Klefki kind of cheats speed, I guess, with Prankster. But I think like having like a base 90, a base 85 would have been good. Just to stop sort of, you know, base 100 guys being able to run Adamant for free, things like that. In saying that, I think that just on the topic of Klefki, we'll just look at hazards, and I think they're quite decent. None of like the hazard setters are like top tiers, but I think for the most part, like if Klefki's coming, it probably gets to spike at least a game. If Bronzong's coming, it probably is just able to run Stealth Rocks. Unless it's like an Iron Defense, Body Press kind of game, but even then, like, there's enough support from Nidoqueen or Spike from Ogerpon that there'll usually be like at least one hazard on the opponent's side of the field, I feel like. And as for defog, like I don't really feel like Frostmoth is a real defogger. Same with Zard, but Tornadus is obviously one of the premier ones we have in the tier. Klefki can do it in a pinch if required. Priority defog is helpful. And I do think it's quite important that those defogs do happen, because hazards can be quite detrimental to this team, especially Zard, especially if it's pre-megged as well. But also Frostmoth if it gets boots knocked off or something along those lines. Yeah, so in terms of like the type profiles as well, I think that it's not often that you just see like all green or grey down here. In saying that, I do think that it's mainly just because like Klefki kind of cheats typings a little bit. Bronzong kind of cheats typings a little bit, and also like there's not like a massive amount of resists for some types. So like fire is like well resisted. Fire. There's not too many guys that are weak to fire, but there's also not too many that like resist it. It's mainly just Slowbro, and if you really want to risk switching Zard in hard, you can also do that. Same sort of thing with like ground, right? Like, you know, Bronzong and Tornadus are pretty good into ground, so that's like typically fine. And honestly, it's a pretty good combination, I think, because Tornadus can sometimes suffer from like Edgequake combos, whereas Bronzong is a levitator that doesn't fall prey to the same sort of things that Tornadus does. So I think they complement each other quite decently. And it's the same sort of thing, like Ghost here, you know, times might be relying a lot on Lickitung rather, his patented pick, in order to deal with that sort of stuff, which he has used, in fairness, to great effect in prior draft leagues. But, you know, it's still not something that maybe is the most optimal way to deal with these sort of issues. Offensively, I like this team. I think Ogerpons and Zard are quite nice together. Fire and water, sort of covering each other quite well. Yeah, and Tornadus sort of supplements that combination, as I was saying as well, allowing for some decent special attack damage to come through, getting rid of some grass types for Ogerpon as well, general U-turn pressure that allows for one of these two or even Nidoqueen to come in, and other times patented pick. Realistically, actually, would have like maybe Z Nidoqueen be better than Slowbro? Maybe, I don't know. Like, I feel like Slowbro is not bringing Z any games. Maybe you bring Z Nidoqueen one game, but much for muchness, really. Yeah, overall, I think this team's like just solid. I don't really like. I don't know if anything like super wows me, but there's nothing that like I'm looking at where I'm like, oh, that's not great. The Pokemon cover each other quite decently. There's a little bit of type stacking, you know, double water, double psychic, things like that. Not the end of the world. I do think that maybe the defensive core can get a little threatened. Double regen is solid. I don't think Times really has to worry about that. But it's more so, say, Bronzong and Klefki defensively. Damage on them will stick. I guess there's potential Wish support, but that won't be there every game. To be fair, knowing Times, it probably will be there every game. But I do think that the team could potentially get broken down a little bit. The speed control is also a little bit sketchy, just because Ogerpon can't run a Scarf, Zard can't run a Scarf, Tornadus is going to have to do the heavy lifting there, and then Scarf Nidoqueen, like, it's something you can bring, but I don't think it's really going to, like in most matches, it's not going to make a difference. So I think Times is just going to have to kind of scout Scarves rather than being able to counterpunch with his own. Which could be a bit annoying in certain matchups. Just check down here as well. There's some Heal Well support, Wish support. It is again on Lickitung, but you know, it's there, it exists. Momentum wise, it's decent enough. I think it's mainly Ogerpon Torn, and this guy, Slobo, that's going to be using it. It's probably enough to facilitate Zard and Nidoqueen to come in. In saying that, like, would it be better with a bit more momentum? Yeah, sure, it definitely would be. But, you know, I think Times has prioritized covering his typings with things like Bronzong, Terrascrafty and stuff like that, more so than setting up those vortexes, which I think is a fair option. Is there anything else really to say about this team? I think there's, yeah, decent disruption, like it's indicated here. Solid phasing, though no hazing. Yeah, and in terms of setup, I won't bother scrolling all the way down there. But I think it's decent enough setup-wise. Like, you know, all three of the big hitters can set up. You know, Scrafty can set up if required as well. Bronzong can be a defensive setup so I think that's quite solid overall. So I think I'll also tentatively put Times up here as well. I'm not sure like where I would put it either side here. I'll probably get back to that. Moving on to Vicky's team. They have, what have we got here? It says Terra Sparthra, which has the potential to be decent. I think that it can definitely get out of hand if if the opposition either just doesn't have the means of shutting it down, or if, say, like opposing, you know, steel types, things like that have already gone down over the course of the match. I think this thing can really run rampant. In saying that, I think, well, maybe I'll get back to a Terra Sparthra actually. But it can definitely do things, and I think it's definitely something that's going to cause some headaches in team prep. Wishy-Washy, it's probably fine. I can't remember if anyone's ever drafted this before. I can't quite remember how strong it gets. Like, the base 40 HP sucks, but having this on a Terra Captain, it's not bad. From memory, it does like Earthquake and things like that. So I feel like that's quite decent. Like Terra Ground, maybe. Banded Wishy-Washy probably like could pick up a couple kills in certain matchups. And then Z Incineroar, I don't think is like a very good Z captain. But like, I'm sure there's probably worse Z captains out there as well. I feel like Terrapagos probably would have just preferred to have the Z, even if you don't bring it too much. It has like some pretty solid coverage that would benefit from a Z Crystal, maybe catch people unawares. Some sort of like rapid spin, calm mind plus Z move set probably could get a lot of things rolling. But Incineroar's been the choice, and I hope to see that Incineroar does some pretty decent things. You know, it can be quite strong, can set up as well, so yeah, I'm curious to see how that one goes. I can't remember whether Vicky drafted Shaman Sky in the past or not. I feel like they did, but I could be completely wrong. All in all, it's a solid pick. You know, it does get shut down a little bit by the well-documented, at this point, Covert Cloak, same sort of with Esparthra, so I'm not sure I really like that combination. I don't think they really facilitate each other too well. They both kind of get a little bit annoyed by the same stuff, so Steel types I think are going to be quite a menace for this team, especially because the Mega of Choice, it can break through Steel types, but it's not exactly what I would say is like a Steel killer, and in fact it is weak to Steel itself. So I do feel like that's going to be a bit tricky for this team to overcome. I would have maybe like to see, you know, maybe I'm just being biased to my own team here, but if there was, say, like a Magnezone on this team to trap opposing Steels, or just in general, some sort of like stronger ground type, you know, it could have helped facilitate these two a little bit better. But there's still options, right? Especially with Z Incineroar, you know, you might be able to get something rolling, breaking through things that people aren't expecting to be broken through. Typing wise, I think that this team probably would have benefited from a little bit more of a ground resistance. That's sort of like, I guess, the main thing I'd say about the typings. Otherwise, I don't think like it's too bad across the board. Not having a rock resist is a bit annoying, but that's mainly, I'd say it's more annoying for stealth rocks rather than, there's not too many rock type sweepers going around. Though Vicky does have to verse like I don't even know what rock types have even been drafted, honestly. I don't think Tyranitar got drafted, but hypothetically, if there's like a Tyranitar on the other side, probably would pose a huge issue for this team. You know, thankfully that's not the case for Vicky though. Speed tier wise, it's fine. I think Espartha especially does circumvent speed tier issues too, and there's not really any like gaps in between these speed tiers other than maybe like initially between these two. But again, I think that the speed tiers are fine. I don't really have any issue with that. I think that as well, if there was an issue with speed tiers, there's Smeagol Sticky Web support, if required. We also saw T last season, again I can't remember who they were partnered with, but pull out the Smeagol doing all kinds of crazy shit. So maybe Vicky takes a bit of inspiration from those matches, and we could definitely see some crazy shenanigans. In terms of the other picks, Bellybolt's solid. Obviously would like it as a Terra Captain, but it's still a fine Pokemon otherwise. Sizzle's solid too. Yeah, I mean, Wishy-Washy and Smeagol do tank these average stats quite a lot, actually. Sizzle being the main source of physical damage, it's honestly probably fine when you consider that like Incineroar has a Z and Altaria can Dragon Dance and shit like that, so probably not too bad. I just think that the wall breaking of this team is probably a bit lacking, at least to start with, but it can ramp up. It's just that initially versus certain tanks it will be quite tricky to break through. On top of that, just like even looking at these mons, I can already tell the removal is going to be like quite solid. These are all four of these are solid options. I'm pretty sure I've used all of them except maybe Tentacruel. I can't quite remember. As removalists in the past, Stealth Rocks are okay. Probably would have preferred to see like something a little more than just Piloswine. But you know, Terapagos is a really solid setter, so it's not the end of the world. Momentum's good. Like, I do really like the momentum. It's just sort of like, when I see teams with lots of momentum, I also like to see them paired with just something that really just blows things up. Like a, I don't know, like a Hooper, Unbound, or some sort of wall break, or I don't know, Kartana, Spectria, like something that can really benefit a lot from the momentum. I think that for this team, like getting Shaman in is cool, getting Espartha in to try and start sweeping things is cool. You know, facilitating Altaria to start Dragon Dancing is also cool, but it's not as, say, potent as maybe it could be. Yeah, overall, I think this team can definitely sort of pull things out. I think that Espartha is going to have to be a key player here. You know, I think Shaman's going to be more of a facilitator for Espartha, Terapagos, and Altaria here. I do think some choices could definitely have been better, but I can still see this team pulling out some wins. I will put it here just for now. I'm not sure where it rates with Sleepy and SkateZ's team at the moment, but I'll just put that tentatively there. I feel like this is Goosefragger's team. Yep. Okay. Almost halfway there. This video's gone on for quite a while already. Just, yeah, eyeballing it. I mean, these top three are solid Pokemon. That's a solid start, honestly. Polt's good. Coco's quite solid. I don't know whether like Coco has any like say specific synergies with any of like the other guys on its team. feels almost like more like a takeaway pick. But like in general, it's a strong Pokemon as a standalone guy. Same with Tusk as well. Like, there's been no Sun teams this season, which I've been kind of glad to see, honestly. And Tusk is really solid, to the surprise of absolutely no one. Going up to the captains, Sea Coco's always been good. I'll always recommend that if someone picks Coco. Could have gone Z-Task, but I think Coco's just better. Terra Cryogonal, Terra Overquill is fine. I think Cryogonal especially, you know, it can now give itself Bolt Beam coverage with levitating, being a levitating electric type is like pretty solid. And then I guess like the obvious, what was I gonna say? The obvious sort of next pairing based on just like how many points Goose had left was to go with Overquill, which is fair enough. Terra Moltres has done a lot of work in the past, so I could also have seen a world where Terra Moltres plus Terra Thwackey got picked as well. I don't know which is better. I feel like this is maybe a little bit stronger. In saying that, I don't really rate Overquill too highly. I think it's alright. I've more so seen it as a threat under rain, which this team, unless you manually set it, doesn't have. I could see like Terra Water plus Liquidation, Swift Swimming, Overquill being a pain with Swords Dance. As it stands, I don't think it's like that crazy of a pick, but it's fine. It offers some hazards, which is cool. It is important to note that there were some trades for this team as well. So Bundle and Galvantula were dropped for Coco and Cryogonal. This team didn't need Galvantula, so that's fair enough. It like wouldn't have been bad, but I think the trades made sense. And it was also Iron Bundle with no like Coco to back it up. So yeah, I think that like Iron Bundle's alright, but I wouldn't be picking it without terrain personally. Offensively, I think this team's quite decent. I think that Polt's pretty strong. I think Coco's pretty strong. They are, in my opinion, a little bit similar in their archetype, just of like Pokemon that like their offensive stats. They're good offensively, but their offensive stats aren't like really high. They're not like crazy wall breakers. So I think the team maybe would have benefited maybe having one of these guys be like a stronger wall breaker. But I think they'll still work fine together. They'll overwhelm the opponent with their speed stats. They can both run physical and special sets as well, just depending on the day, so that's going to cause a headache for literally everyone in team in preparation. And then Great Tusk also strong offensively but strong defensively, so he's another guy. And Jirachi, honestly, offensively, defensively, like all four of these like top tier picks, I guess, higher point picks, are going to be a pain in prep. Like I really think I'm glad I don't have to prep versus this team, because it'd be really annoying trying to figure out what each of the different guys are going to do. Defensively, Moltres is pretty solid. It's also decent offensively as well, honestly. Wish support from Mega Ordino will help Great Tusk a fair amount, and also wish support from Jirachi now that I'm thinking about it. Trying to think, like I don't think that Maractus is anything to write home about. Realistically, I also don't think you really needed Lantern here. I think you would usually want to pick it up for maybe like the Volt Absorb stuff if you really needed it. It's decently bulky as well, bulky water type. I guess this team, once it dropped Bundle, doesn't have a water type, so that's fair enough. But I don't think it's like some sort of like, you know, crazy strong pick here. But it's also only 6 points, so like whatever. Hazard wise, it's quite decent. I think, again, like Overquill being relegated to hazards is fine, but I don't think it's like worth its points maybe. I might just be a hater though. Removal was pretty sensational though. I don't think that there's really any scenarios where Goose is going to be struggling to find the correct removalist. Momentum's really strong as well. So that'll be quite nice, and it kind of again ties into what I was saying before with I think Vicky's team, that like if one of these guys was some really strong wall breaker, then you could always just like U-turn into that. But as it stands, this team is sort of setting up more of like a vortex combo, which is fine. But that's kind of like, it doesn't have like both options. If it wants to wall break, it's probably U-turning into Tusk and Tusk alone, or some sort of Z Coco, I think. But overall, that's fine. Setup wise, the team is decent. Like, there's not really any like nasty footers or swords dancers, so it's more of a slow setup, which again sort of harks back to the wall breaking point that I was making before. But that's alright. I don't think, it's maybe an issue, but it's probably not the biggest issue in the world. Yeah, overall, I do like this team. I think these speed tiers could have been a little bit better. I think some of the typings, yeah, it's like missing a few resists, which does make things kind of tricky, I guess. Defensively, I feel like the core of this team is fine, but it's not like overwhelmingly strong, like the defensive profile. Like say if like Jirachi gets overwhelmed by something, then all of a sudden ice moves kind of might run rampant, or like fire moves if Moltres goes down, things like that are a little bit of a worry. But maybe I'm just not like crediting the natural tankiness of some of these guys like Mega Ordino, for example. Overall, I might have to. Oh yeah, Goose is over here for some reason. I feel like it'll probably end up being top of B, because I do quite like the team. I'll revisit it though a bit later. But yeah. Next to them is Connor and Cheese, who I don't think did any trades from what I can tell. First of all, I mean, their Terra captains are Jolteon and Hitmontop, which I find is pretty funny considering in the other division, Banjo and Sylveon also picked Terra Jolteon and Terra Hitmontop at like the same time, I think. So I don't know who was copying who, but I think they're decent. I appreciate that both teams that picked the Jolteon also made it a Terra captain. Like, it seems like a no-brainer, but I'm glad that it happened all the same. I think it'll be quite strong. I did say I haven't watched any replays. It's like a mild lie. I've seen like a little bit of some. I think I joined a live battle for like 5 turns, and in it I saw like the Quick Feet Jolteon putting in a lot of work. So it's already like 1 game down, and Terra Jolteon's, or I don't even think it terrestrialized that game, to be honest. I think it was like Terra Preview Water Jolteon without Volt Absorb, which is extremely baller to do. But yeah, it was already putting in work just as a regular Jolteon. Yeah, and Z Heatran's like really solid. I almost glossed over that, but yeah, I think Z Heatran's one of the strongest Z captains you can have. I definitely rate it really highly. Speed tiers I also like quite a bit. You also have Prankster support from Whimsicott. Connor, and I assume Connor was paired with Cheese, but I could be wrong, but they've used Whimsicott before. I remember it like 6-0ing someone, so that's sort of a tried and true pick for them. Kyurem B, now with access to Scale Shot. I'm curious to see how that goes. I think it'll be a strong pick. It might still run into some of the issues that it's come across in seasons past. But overall, like, I don't think, it's still something definitely to be feared, and I think it has like decent support around it as well. Like, I'm looking at Jolteon, Whimsicott, Tornadus, low kicks, all guys that get pivot, for example. You get Chilly Reception as well with the Kyurem, which will make it quite an issue to deal with. It means you can maybe even go like a bulkier Kyurem or like a more Spadeffy Kyurem to sort of even out those defenses and then start boosting that way. With Scale Shot or just like wall breaking, like max HP, max attack adamant or something, make it really bulky. Because from memory, I think it has like base 125 HP, yeah, quite strong. So I think, yeah, this, like, there's a lot to facilitate Kyurem's power. I think that, you know, sometimes Kyurem can struggle against, like, certain, maybe, like, steel types or certain fairy types, which is sort of where Heatran comes in. And also Nidoking, it deals with both those types effectively. Like, it definitely sort of feels like, at least to me, that a lot of the different parts of this team were well constructed around the idea of Kyurem sweeping. All of like the moving parts are able to get rid of any potential checks that Kyurem has, which shouldn't be too many. It has a few guys faster than it for cleanup, especially Jolteon. You know, Whimsicott, maybe like Encore support or Stun Spore support. Double Tailwind from Whimsicott and Tornadus. Also supports the Kyurem. You have Sticky Web support from Mask of Rain. All in all, like, I think it's really clear that, I mean, maybe they'll say after this, if they watch this, that if they were just picking things for the sake of picking things, but to me it looks like they had a really clear plan going through of what they wanted to draft. And I think it's been quite effective. Like, I think that this will prove quite difficult to break through. It kind of reminds me a bit of the season where Connor and Cheese had like a Volcarona team and like a Gyarados as well, I think. And they had like a Alolan Ninetales support and things like that. Which, like, on paper I was like, I don't know if the team's like the strongest, but it's certainly still top 5 that season back then. It was certainly still like a top 5 team that I could very easily see just running away with the championship, which it did. I'm kind of getting similar sort of vibes with this. The only thing I would kind of say I think worries me a bit is just some of these like weaknesses to certain types. Like, there are a lot. And like the Terra Captains aren't necessarily like extremely defensive or anything like that. So like, you know, you could Terrasilize your Hitmontop to, like, you know, it removes one flying weakness, for example. But it's not exactly a guy that's like super defensive, or he doesn't like passively heal or anything like that. So it's sort of limited in what, like how the defenses can be shored up. I kind of think similarly towards like rocks as well. A lot of guys are either going to be needing to wear boots, or there's going to be like a lot of removal support's going to be required. Which, in fairness, you know, there's 2 Prankster Defoggers, which will ensure rocks stay off the field. You've also got a Rapid Spinner, so it shouldn't be too hard, but it's just something to keep in mind. And also like Ghosts again. Ghost comes back as sort of a recurring theme here. But like, I wouldn't ever say that low kicks is like a good switch into a Shadow Ball or something. Like, it's still, depending on who's using it, probably taking like 40 to 50. So it's just something to be like, what's the word? Not concerned about, but just like cautious of, I guess. Yeah, overall, there's ways to overcome these type disadvantages, definitely, and like, the team is constructed to just kind of like systematically take out certain threats. So like, do I think this team is going to like get away with like 6-0s over and over and over? No. Do I think this team will get away with like decently comfortable 3-0s fairly often? Yeah, I think that that's probably like quite likely, especially being piloted by players like Connor and Cheese. You know, offensively, the team is quite strong. You know, don't let Nidoking's 81st attack fool you. That guy's still a special wall breaker. Hazard-wise, it could do with like, just because there's Z Heatran, I think that maybe there's less games where it's going to be running rocks as it typically would. And I think Kyurem would appreciate maybe like more spike support or like another rocker or something. But like overall, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think that this is still a decent hazards profile. And then in terms of removal, these guys are good enough. I think the only thing I would say is that maybe their defoggers aren't as tanky as maybe you would typically like. Tornadus and like none of them can, I guess, passively heal really, or like Whimsicott can, but its stats aren't like super high or anything like that. So maybe that's just sort of like one caveat to this team. I wouldn't be surprised if like if a defogger gets predicted on the switch or something like that, or they have to sack a guy in order to get the defog off. Maybe it's beneficial in the game state, but there's also times where that might not be the case. Maybe Tornadus just like dies, and then all of a sudden the Kyurem has to contend with, you know, rocks and spikes and shit just being on the field at all times. Momentum wise, I've already sort of covered that, but it's quite solid. I had no idea that this guy got Baton Pass. I'd be surprised if it uses it, but it exists, I suppose. Yeah, and then in terms of, you know, lots of sort of phasing here. Although, I mean, I guess if you're using Kyurem as like your Aurora, probably not the best thing I've ever seen in my life. Hell of a lot of speed control, but a lot of these moves are like kind of questionable. And then yeah, there's a lot of setup. I think I didn't watch the full replay, but I think someone mentioned Swords Dance Bayonet doing absolutely truckloads of damage. That's also a thing. Like, these guys all kind of can facilitate, as much as they facilitate Kyurem, they can facilitate the Bayonet as well. So I think that's also another threat to be aware of. And there's probably even like a bit of like the fact that their second slowest guy is base 70 is probably also like quite underrated. I feel like this team is, yeah, overall quite solid. I think it'll definitely be somewhere in A tier. I'm not sure where as of yet. I'll probably fix this all around later. But yeah, on to the next. Alrighty, now moving on to Moose and Slam's team. They also drafted Mega Alakazam. I think they were first pick. No, I'm completely trolling actually. It went all the way down to 7th pick, which is kind of crazy. I mean, the very clear thing to obviously look at with his team is the first 2 picks. They have Zam plus Lele. Which, you know, it's pretty scary. I think everyone could probably agree that unless you have some hyper-specific counter, these guys will be getting kills in some capacity. Zam being extremely facilitated with Expanding Force plus Side Terrain. Lele not getting Expanding Force, but it being able to take out the Dark types that Zam might otherwise not appreciate. They're an extremely strong duo. I think that it's going to be very tough for teams to deal with this, and I think that it's going to be extremely tough to like get a clean victory on Moose and Slam because of it. They're always going to have the firepower off of these 2 individuals to take out some of your mons. Mega Alakazam is always going to find a way to revenge kill something, unless you again have a really specific counter. It's going to be able to do whatever it needs to. Outside of that, I don't like the Z Captain. I know that I think Pingu and Jess used Cobalion non-Z in like season 5 or season 6 or something, and it actually did pretty solid, even like offensively. Like they mainly use it defensively, but there was like games where it was offensive and it did quite well. But I just think that I look at Zam and I look at Lele and I think to myself, they have somewhat of the same counters. Like in terms of like certain steel types maybe, or like, you know, steel birds or something like that. And even though, like, say for example, Lele can like kind of break them, or like you can rely on Focus Blast from these 2 dark guys to do huge damage to certain individuals, provided they're not like an Aegis Slash or something. I just think that Z Lele would have, like, it's just one of the best Z captains on offer in the entire draft, in the entire league. Kabalion's not. I get why they've chosen it. I understand that if a physical mon didn't have the Z crystal, then you're really hyper indexing into special attack, which means that, like, you know, maybe if this guy didn't have the Z move, then you just run 6 assault vests every game versus Moose and Slam, and you're probably fine. Bit of hyperbole, but like, I still think that Gigavolt Havoc or all out pummeling from this thing here would have really helped a lot versus the common counters that are definitely getting brought into both of these guys. So yeah, I'm not convinced on Z Kabalion. I think independently of everything, I think it can probably do fine. I just think on this team, maybe it would have been better to try and put the Z on Lele and then just try and find some sort of physical guy that has a base attack higher than Kabalion's 91, I think it is, or 90, yeah. I get it's also good defensively. Like, you do need, like, you probably need a steel type with this team, like, fair enough. But yeah, it's the same sort of thing with the Terra captains as well. Like, there's 6 points worth of terrestrialization that is just sort of gone to waste, which I think Sneasel will be good. I think it'll probably overperform for a 6-pointer, but I don't think it'll sort of like bridge the gap to be as good as like some other potential Terra captains. Even on this team, like, they've used Moose and Slam have used Terra Alamamola before. I mean, maybe that's why they didn't choose it, because they've used it before. But that's always done like decently. But again, like, you need it for the physical damage, so I get that. I just think that when like your best physical options are Kabalion, Staraptor, and Sneasel, you could end up coming under a bit of trouble. But, you know, that's just my perspective. It's not necessarily how games will go. Maybe Zam just one-shots everything. That could also be a conclusion, right? Speed tier Y, the team's fine, I think. Like, a bit of a gap if you know, I mean, anything with a Zam is probably going to have like a big gap, to be fair. Gap's a little bit bigger if like Sneasel and Persian don't come. Sounds like an extra 7 speed. It's not the end of the world, really. I really like the Rotom Heat because it does deal with some of the things I was mentioning before, like Steel Birds, just different shit like that. I think it can be quite strong. Gligar 2, again, can help deal with Steel types, it can just be a general tank, which I think is quite annoying for teams to deal with. Gligar's been pretty successful in the past. As far as typings go, though, I think that, especially like the rock typing, like, it's Kabalion or bust, sort of. And it's very rare that you encounter a rock type that isn't running some sort of earthquake or ground type move. So I do think that's going to be a really big issue for Moose and Slam. Saying that, maybe Mola just comes in and tanks everything and they're fine. Maybe Sinister comes in and tanks like the, I don't know, the Landorus Therian or whatever. And it's fine, but it's just something to keep in mind. Water as well, a bit of an issue as well, but again, Mola, Sinister, they should be able to get it done. It's a bit of an interesting defensive core. It's like these 4 are the defensive core plus maybe a Kabalion. It's a bit atypical, I would say. But I feel like it can get things done. Like, all those guys can heal in some capacity. All those guys will get fat wishes from Alamamola. Probably heals them all the way up to full. Yes, it's just base HP is also quite low. I just don't think like the whole team really benefits from wish support. Like, wishing up Alakazam, whatever. Wishing up Kabalion, it might be tricky to do that. It might be tricky to succeed with that. But it does appreciate it all the same. Like, wishing Lele, again, like, it's doable, but it's not like great. And while I said that these guys can get things done as a defensive core, I don't think that they're like some sort of like crazy defensive core. Like I don't think that they're, you know, they're not going to be like the best draft league defenses ever. They'll just sort of, they'll suffice. They'll do what they need to do. Which I feel like I would have liked to have seen something a bit more defensive. Maybe I'm just being a bit picky, I don't know. But I feel like I would have liked to have seen something a bit more defensive to go with the Zam and the Lele, and I think I would have liked to see a bit more physical attack to go with the Zam and the Lele. And it's hard, like when you have 38 points in 2 picks spent on extremely strong special attackers, but that's kind of all they do. They're good picks together, but it does make the rest of the draft difficult. So I get that it can be tricky, and I might be just being overly critical because this combination is very strong. Scrolling down here, like, I mean, it's Glimmet and Gligar show. Realistically, I think that the Hazards is fine. I think Gligar will probably make an appearance most games, so they can sort of do whatever they want. Cobalion as well, like, even though it's definitely going to have some shit matchups, maybe just because it's a Z captain and it gets access to rocks, maybe it'll show up a lot as well. Would you prefer a slightly more reliable setters? I think Gligar's pretty reliable, but like something secondary with like Zam to help chip things down, or rather to help chip things down for Zam, probably you'd prefer that. But you know, beggars can't be choosers. Like you can't draft everything. I think this is fine. I think the defog's good too. Gligar's solid, Rotom's solid. One or both of them will be present in every match, so that's fine. Yeah, and I think that the pivot's pretty solid. Like most of these guys, even if you exclude Staraptor depending on the set, but like in most battles there's probably going to be at least 4 guys with pivot moves. And there's going to be, and the other 2 guys are going to be a Lele and a Zam. So like, that's kind of scary. I think that's all you really need. Even if it's like certain games, maybe Cobalion doesn't run Volt Switch, that's still like 3 out of the 6 guys have pivot. It's pretty solid. Yeah, I don't know. I think this team, it's like polarizingly strong, but then it also has like some issues with it that are bigger than maybe the issues that I've identified with other teams so far. But I could also just be stupid, so that's always possible. Lele plus Zam could just completely run shit. I don't really know. It felt quite strong on Pingu when I used it in the randomized draft, and that was with a regular Zam. So, you know, I can definitely see how this could just carry games, and then these guys down here sort of pick up the slack and do the rest of everything, whittle things down. You know, Leech Seed or hazard people or status people, knock people off, all just to incrementally lead to the sweep. I feel like I've probably spoken about this team for a lot. I think this is JamestheKatt. I think this is Moose and Slam, Ice Cube Mafia. I'll put it in B for now. I'm not sure how I feel about this. I did quite like Goose's team though. I feel like this is probably how it'll stay, but I will revisit it in just like the last 5 minutes. Kivs and Lucas. They've gone back and drafted a lot of their old favorites. I don't remember, for example, when like they drafted Volcarona ever, but I'm sure they must have done because they've drafted all these guys before. Maybe not Bayonet, but like whatever. Just first of all, on the captains, in my opinion, if Garchomp gets drafted, like 90% of the time, it should probably be the Z captain. I know Mesprit's a bit more like, it's different. Like, Garchomp without Z, or like Mesprit with Z is probably a bigger boost than up the tiers, and maybe Garchomp gets with Z, but it's just like, Garchomp's coming every match. It's such a good user of Z. Personally, I would Z it. I get the Mesprit pick, but yeah. both teams that drafted Garchomp in both divisions didn't give the Z Crystal to it. It just kind of made me a little sad. But whatever. They don't draft with me in mind, they draft with their own plans in mind. Terra Captains, I mean, they chose Cole and Mantine. You know, Kivs and Lucas Classic, like, could they have chosen the Raichu that recently has gotten Terra Blast? And I think would have been a really strong Terra Captain and would have been really cool to see Raichu pop off. They could have done that. But it's Mantine and Colossal round 2. Fair enough. They're tried and true. I've seen Kivs and Lucas absolutely obliterate people with these picks before. Why wouldn't you just do it again? Especially when that's the whole theme of their team. Just first and foremost, I guess, like, Kivs is constantly speaking about how shit Grimmsnarl is, but like they've drafted it. I assume that they might change their tune, given the fact that they've drafted a Volcarona alongside of it. It kind of, I mean, I was speaking about Connor and Cheese's team before from a couple seasons ago that won with a very similar combination. It's going to be very difficult to deal with. I would be surprised if these two alone don't just win games without the rest of the team really needing to do a whole lot else. So I think that's very scary. I think probably screens plus Volk or screens plus some stupid setup sweep similar to Volk is maybe not as drafted in this division, in this server as maybe it could otherwise be, because I do think it is quite strong, even if it is telegraphed. Overall, it's got good speed with Mega Lop, a little bit of a gap between it and Raichu, and then if Raichu doesn't come, because like I said, it's not a Terra Captain, less likely to come, there's quite a substantial gap between Lop and Chomp, which could be annoying for Kivs and Lucas. It just kind of means that there's probably a decent amount of like base 120s, something like that, that are able to just get free damage by going adamant or whatever. So yeah, it's a little bit annoying, but what can you do? I don't think it's like too detrimental. Yeah, damage-wise, and maybe this is why it's C Mesprit as well, for a similar reason as I can't remember whose team it was. But like a lot of these guys are like mainly physical damage. Celesteela, maybe it goes special, but for the most part it'll probably be operating as a tank. Grimmsnarl's physical or support. Like, there's not a whole lot of special damage outside of Volk, but Volk's coming out later in a match. It's not just coming out to wall break. Specs Volcarona is probably not the bring most times. So I like that the Z Crystal is shoring up a bit of that special damage on the side of the Mesprit. I do think it might still be a bit of an issue. Teams might be able to allocate their EVs accordingly to deal more with physical stuff than special stuff. But who knows, maybe that's when Mesprit just goes absolutely off, or a Meteor Beam Celesteela that Pingu and I have definitely not been swept in 6 turns by before. Anyways, moving on. I think their type profiles are fine. Water looks pretty dodgy, but then I guess you remember that Colossal is a Terra Cap, and it's all of a sudden a bit less dodgy. Mantine as well just kind of cheats by doing whatever the fuck it wants with its terrestrialization. It can Terra Fire and then just still absorb water or something along those lines. They do have 3 ground immunities. Wouldn't have hated seeing a resist in there as well, especially once Mantine terrestrializes. But again, not like the end of the world. You know, Ghost is a pretty strong type into this team. Lopunny's not really like a switching into Ghost, because a lot of Ghosts could just be running like Wisp or something, same sort of deal with Grimmsnarl. So I think that could be a little bit scary. But for the most part, like, the typings of this team are fine. Like, the type chart, I don't really see too much to be concerned about, really. Like, it seems quite, like, well-rounded is the word I'm looking for. Yeah, and this sort of, like, 98 attack, 89 spatak, sort of, like, drives home what I was talking about in terms of the split of physical and special. Like some of the tanks, like you know, Cole and Mantine can do like special damage or whatever, but it's nothing to write home about. Hazard-wise, I think it's decent. Even if like there's some games where you want like a full setup chomp, there's enough other options for rocks. And if it's not a full set, if it's a defensive chomp game, then you're set with hazards. Like your life's fine. Removal-wise, it's all kind of in the hands of the Terra Captains because you don't really want to be running Default Volcarona every single game of your life, or really any game of your life, especially when you're running it with Groomsnarl. I do wonder if this makes maybe the team a bit too telegraphed in the sense that if I'm prepping against it, I know one of these guys is probably coming. I probably knew that anyways because they're the Terra Captains, but this kind of like really drives it home. So there's probably different prep you can do accordingly, but like they're not bad removalists. I think Terra Cole's really solid for its point value. I think Terra Mantine, we've moved it up and up and up, but it's still solid. Like it's still a good Pokemon. Just because it's gone up in points doesn't mean it's gonna do worse in battles. It actually has no effect. So yeah, they're like decent options. Maybe you would have liked to have seen something like one other pick, but not the end of the world. The overall bulk of this team's pretty solid, I would say, especially with Celesteela as well. I know Raichu has a Wish, but you could maybe argue, I mean, that's not real anyways. I feel like you could argue that like having a Wisher on this team would be nice. But it doesn't necessarily like play into like the Volcarona plus Grimmsnarl type of offense that they're going for here. So I kind of get why they might not have drafted with that in mind. I do wonder if maybe the team should have like gone just like, I don't know, it's hard because I like the defensive the defenses of this team. I just wonder if maybe there should be a couple more offensive guys to sort of just like really drive home like the hyper offense, you know, screens plus someone else play style. Because I don't know if like the Grimmsnarl pick is getting the most bang for its buck there. Like Garchomp's okay behind screens, but like, yeah, definitely maybe could have, you know, drafted like again like a Gyarados or something, just harking back to that cheese and kind of team. But overall, I think like what they've got going on is fine. I think it's just a solid team. I think it'll end up being an A tier somewhere. I'm using this old icon Tusk Enterprise as it was on like a couple sheets, a couple drafts ago. They didn't have a new icon, so yeah, even though they don't have Tusk, this is just their icon. Alright, so last three teams. This is Retho's team, I think. Yeah, Retho's team. And the first thing I guess I sort of thought when seeing the first three picks is that is probably the strongest Dragon Fairy Steel Core. That's been drafted maybe in both divisions. I can't really remember what's in Rule Edge, but I think definitely so far I haven't really identified anything that like seems like a stronger sort of core in that sense. So I really think that's these three Pokemon in general are very like scary. They're going to be very difficult to break. Terra Celebi also adds on to that, so you can just make Terra Celebi whatever the hell you want. It's had a lot of success in the past. I think it's a really solid pick. I think honestly Terra Kadabra is genuinely decent as well. I like that as a pick. I think it's solid. I'll always be a fan of teams that draft 3 or more psychic types as well. Z Dragonite, it's good on paper. I think in practice what often happens though is that rocks get set up and then you kind of shit your pants the entire game trying to find a way to get Dragonite in. safely without popping multi-scale, and then you just miss every single opportunity to sweep with the Z move. So I think that it's going to be difficult to navigate the games where Dragonite is holding the Z crystal. I think it can be really potent, but I just haven't seen it be really successful in past draft leagues. In past seasons, rather, I mean. Speed tier wise, I really like it. Mega Main is really solid. Zamazenta is really solid. Salazzle also quite good. Not really any identifiable gaps, I would say. Maybe between like Salazzle and a defensive Celebi, you could argue. I guess my main issues when it comes to this team is just kind of like looking at these type charts. There's a lot of things. Like it's almost half the it's almost half the available types that Retho has to be watching out for. So it's sort of just like, yeah, it's tricky. Like you look at, say, the weakness to Ghost and Dark, and you're like, okay, I'll make my Celebi Terra Dark to deal with that. But now all of a sudden you're extra weak to Fairy types. Or you make your Celebi Terra Steel. You know, it helps with the Fairy, it helps with the Flying, it helps with the Ice weaknesses. You know, that's fair enough. But all of a sudden Ground now gets like way better into your team, especially if you haven't, say, like brought Xatu alongside it as well, as a second immunity alongside Dragonite. So I think that Celebi can like patch up the type chart, but it doesn't excuse the type chart. Like this is going to be defensively as strong as sort of I was talking about these three being, plus like Celebi support as well. I think in reality, just due to the nature of the lack of resistances across the board, it's gonna be really difficult for Retho to sort of navigate each turn. There's probably gonna be a lot of 50-50s, and you can't always win those. You know, all their guys are gonna just be chipped. You know, there's Wish support, but it's on Xatu, like it's not that great. You've got Leech Seed support from Celebi. But other than that, like your Zamazenta isn't healing, your Primarina isn't healing, your Dragonite is probably, like if it wants to heal, it's going to be having to run Roost, which is fine, but maybe you'd prefer it be an extra coverage move. It's just going to be like, yeah, it's difficult because like I look at the Mons individually and I'm like, I actually really like what's going on. Just as like, just looking at the Pokemon individually, but then as it all comes together as a team, it just kind of feels like it might get taken advantage of. If Retho is able to get on the front foot, then all of this is suddenly a lot less relevant. You know, if you're weak to certain types, but you're up 6 mons to 4, then just sack them on. Doesn't matter. Get your offensive momentum back, and then, you know, go 5-3, 4-2, 3-1, 3-0 sort of thing. But I don't know if Retho's going to be able to get into those winning positions without sort of just like, you know, someone with like a Specs Moonblast or a Specs Shadow Ball or something just like coming in and just dropping 50% on every single Pokemon that comes in. So there might need to be a bit of thinking outside the box. Removal wise, I'm also like not convinced. Like Dragonite. Defensive Dragonite's really good, actually. I really like defensive Dragonite. But I feel like then it's kind of a little bit of a waste of the Z move, and there's not like... You're going to be having to like status a lot of people, I think, in order to sort of like whittle people down with like Leech Seed support, plus defensive Dragonite, plus defensive Prima, plus defensive Zama. Like, you could stall games out like that. But in reality, I'm not sure how effective it'll be. I don't think Defog Xatu is like that amazing. It's fine. Rapid Spin Bramble's pretty decent, I would say. Yeah, like, but is Bramble coming every game? It can definitely come some games, but when it's not, I think removal is going to be quite tricky to try and slot in. Hazards though are good. I think good amount of Stealth Rockers. You've got a Spiker if you want it. You've got a T-Spiker that's quite annoying to deal with. Yeah, this is sort of like the other thing is that like there's also a little bit of a lack of momentum. Like Dragonite and Slamanander don't have momentum themselves. It's mainly going to be relying on Celebi, Mega Main, and Primarina. But say if Primarina is running like a setup set, then you have really not much momentum at all. So it could be tricky to get into those winning positions that I was talking about previously. Overall, I think, like, I like Rethos team, but, like, despite it, I'm going to put it maybe, like, here. Just because I think it's going to get taken advantage of, and I think it's going to be really difficult to pilot. It can be really effective when piloted well. I think Rethos is a really solid player, so they might be able to get it done. Because these, like, picks are just strong. They're strong Pokemon. But I'm not sure if it's enough. I'm not sure if it's enough to overcome this, plus a couple of the other shortcomings. Next up is Kyber. This is it's a Kyber team. The team is extremely aggressive. In saying that, it does actually have like some decent defenses. Like there's a Gliscor here, there's a a Florges, etc. Just looking at the captains, it was always going to be between Z Zeraora and Z Hydreigon. I said to someone when Kyber hadn't chosen his captains yet that I was convinced it was going to be Zeraora, just because Kyber likes that sort of playstyle. Fast guy with a Z move can use like Z bulk up or work up or shit like that if he wants to. Hydreigon also would have been a completely fine pick, but Zeraora is a good Z captain. It always has been. Terra captains, I would have liked to have seen Terra Florges, honestly. Especially with access to Terra Blast, I think it could have opened up a new sort of playstyle for Florges that we haven't seen in the 11 prior seasons. With like Carmine plus some sort of Terra Blast that deals, Terra Blast Fire for Steel types, for example. And saying that, Terra Serena's fine. I think Grass typing, it's alright, but if you can make the Serena like a water type, a fairy type, I think it just kind of prefers to be that. Defensively its stats are decent. It has a lot of good defensive utility. So I feel like, yeah, it'll definitely benefit from Terra, just in a different way than maybe Florges would. The other Terra captains are Heatmor, Fiero, and Sobble. They're probably shit. I think if Kyber is either guaranteed playoffs or guaranteed out of playoffs, though, expect to see Terra Sobble make an appearance, and it might just sweep. I don't know. Mega Sobble. Yeah, I guess similar to Rethos team, my main issue is like the type chart. Yeah, there's like flying's not the biggest deal again because of move distribution, but like it's scary still. If you're switching into like Tornadus Hurricane as Zeraora, Zeraora is still taking like 40%. That guy is very frail. If your Moonblast switching is Heatmor, I mean, it's probably gonna have to be like Terra Steel Serena, right? But you can't just run like a fairy resist on your Terra every single game. There's like a halfway competent fairy, so I feel like that's kind of rough. Same with like your only rock resist being Valiant. That's like, yeah, that's tricky. There's like there's ways around it. Kyber's always been more of the player that will take over games offensively rather than stall people out defensively. And honestly, sometimes that's the best game plan. If someone's just coming at you with a bunch of shit that you can't deal with defensively, just be really aggressive. Maybe you lose, maybe you win, but you'll sure as hell make them sweat. You'll make them a bit confused during the process of the match. I think Cleavor's a decently solid pick here. I think Zeraora, Valiant sometimes lack a little bit of damage to get the job done, so just having guaranteed rocks off of a Stone Axe is quite nice. Spike's support from Gliscor as well, definitely well yeah, the sweeping potential on this team's pretty solid. We've seen a lot of Zeraora sweeps in the past. They did kind of calm down a bit since we banned Hidden Power, but it's still quite potent. Valiant too, you know, physical, special, you know, supportive with Encore. It's all quite solid. Same sort of thing with Zeraora, like it can also be physical or special. And I kind of like, you know, when your two like top tier picks have that sort of flexibility, I think it can really place quite a burden on the opponent during prep. They might over prep for something and then forget about something else. Hydreigon's a solid supporter. You know, Valiant deals with some of the things that Hydreigon doesn't like. So if Valiant was used more as a wall breaker against like certain steel types, you know, opposing dragons that might be a bit faster than Hydreigon, I can certainly see Hydreigon then popping out for a sort of more late game style of sweep. And yeah, Hydreigon's sort of like, it just seems really solid, honestly. It's always been a good Pokemon. It can play a number of different roles. I know I commented on Kyber not really being like the super defensive player, but the defensive core is decent. I think Florges plus Serena plus Melodic is quite good. These guys both appreciate wish support. All three of them have ways of generating momentum. Gliscor kind of speaks for itself. It can sort of stand alone or stand with a team defensively. It doesn't really matter. It's just always going to kind of perform. So yeah, like it's good defense. Like the Pokemon are good defensively. It's just that there's a lot of types that are really concerning. And like, you know, if say, I don't know, Spadef Melodic is your only switch into, you know, Specs Moonblasts, maybe it takes one, maybe it takes two, but you can't be doing that every single time, especially if there's enemy rocks on the field or something like that. In saying that, if anyone's going to be able to keep shit off the field, it's Kyber. Not only are there 6 potential removalists, but 5 of the potential removalists are genuinely competent. If you consider that Kyber has only drafted 8 Pokemon, then that means at bare minimum, there's going to be 3 removalists in the game. Even if they're not running removal, there's going to be 3 of them in the game at any given point. Which is kind of obscene. I think Heal Bell support for things like Zeraora and Iron Valiant is quite solid as well. Eases the burden against things such as Flame Body Moltres or Static Zapdos. And Momentum's quite a big deal here as well. The team does maybe lack outside of, you know, a Z move, Zeraora or Specs Hydreigon. It does kind of lack wall breaking power off the rip. But it does have good setup sweepers to use the momentum into. Where would I put this team? I think it's somewhere. It's pretty similar to me in my eyes to Ritho's team. Like even going so far as to have like fast electric type as like, you know, that guy there. Would I rate it higher than Ritho's team? I think they're kind of the same. I think I like that Ritho's like offensive guys can also take a hit. So if push comes to shove, Ritho might not just lose the game off of a bad play, whereas like if you misplay the Valiant, misplay the Zeraora, kind of could just lose, because then you're just left with like, you know, these defensive guys just sort of dicking around, not really doing a whole lot. It's a tough one. I think if there was like a, you know, if these teams could be like equal rank, then I would probably put them equal. But yeah, I'll put it like that for now. And then the last team is JamestheKatt's team. In terms of the captains, we have Z Ambipom for some reason. I think that Z Pecha, Z Meow, Z Dam would all be a bit better than Ambipom, but I appreciate the Ambipom pick because it's kind of cool and I hope it pops off. I do think that Terra Bomb is quite solid. I hope that it's able to do what JamestheKatt is intending it to do with the sweep here. Terra Fire, Terra Ground, whatever it needs to do. It just makes even just prep a bit more annoying, because all of a sudden Rebombi is more than just sticky webs. It can really cause some issues. And I think Appleton's a good secondary Terra. I don't think Appleton's like some sort of like amazing Pokemon, but I think removing Grass Dragon from it does help it a lot. Especially when you combine it with Thick Fat, you can sort of make it some sort of, you know, mega tank against fire and ice. If need be, like it can certainly really polarize very specific matchups. And just if you're wanting, team on the right is from the Ceruledge division, so we won't be looking at that right now. But yeah, like, I might not agree with the Z captain, but I think the Terra captains are quite solid. In terms of the speed tiers, there's like some clumping towards the top, but like it's fine. I don't think it's an issue. There's no like significant gaps either. I think this team does struggle into a couple of the common types that we've addressed before, like flying, like rock, like ghost. I do think that's going to maybe cause some issues for James going forward. Yeah, I think offensively, like this team has some solid offenses. I think that, like, you know, Darm's always annoying to deal with, for example. Meowscarada is solid. Petrarch can do some annoying things, especially with nasty plot sets. You know, Zard Y has always historically been a very strong wall breaker. I'm just never really sold on Zard Y. Even with dedicated Sun teams, it still kind of annoys me a little bit as a Pokemon. Maybe it operates best outside of Sun teams. I don't know, maybe this mob here will facilitate things better than perhaps the Sun teams of the past. But I do just kind of worry, I guess, about some of the picks here, especially because like the removal is very questionable. Like you have a Zard Y, and it's either you're wasting defog on Zard Y, which I think there's probably no situation where you can ever justify that, or you're putting defog on your Rebombi, but your Rebombi's your Terra Captain. You kind of want it to maybe be like quiver dancing and trying to get off a sweep more games than not, or at the very least setting up sticky webs and not having to worry about, you know, defogging. I think a strong rapid spinner would have gone a long way. Like for this team, most of them were probably taken by the time. Yeah, I don't know, but also Zardwire was a super late pick, so I guess like James sort of just drafted Zardwire very face up without the removal to begin with, and just said, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna win," which is fair enough. I respect the mentality. Just don't get hit by the rocks. Don't let them set up the rocks, and just win. Yeah, I do think it could be a bit of a struggle, though, especially when it's sort of like it's not even just Zard, it's like Darm as well. Like, you don't really want to be having to run heavy duty boots Darm. It just kind of feels a bit upsetting. But it might have to happen. You know, same with Bombi as well. Like boots Rebombi's like okay. But again, against some of these like more heavy hazard stacking teams, I really don't see how JamestheKatt has a way out. Like, yeah, it might be tricky. The frailty of all of like the offensive threats, like Bombi, Meow, Zard, Dom, they're all extremely frail. I think that's like keeping them alive is how JamestheKatt is going to win games. So yeah, I'm not sure about the game plan. I think defensively, like, some people rate Suicune, some people don't. I'm kind of like in the middle of it. I kind of want to see Suicune pop off, honestly, because I think it deserves a good season. I think Quag's always good. I think Dusclops has always been a good pick as well. Duraludon may be a bit questionable, but I understand wanting to have a dragon and a steel type. All in one. It also gets access to rocks, I'm pretty sure, right? Yep, so it's a good secondary. Oh, it's an alright secondary rocker alongside Quag. But there's kind of like some overlapping types, I guess, like Double Dragon here, excluding the Terror, I guess. You know, double Water between Quag and Suicune, double Ghost between Dusclops and Petron, double Defensive Ghost at that. So yeah, there's a little bit of overlap, which maybe is why like the typing profile kind of gets a bit dodgy versus certain types. Overall, I think like this team has, like, the offenses are like really strong, and I think that there's definitely just a case to be made for JamestheKatt just rocking up with the most aggressive team ever seen in the history of draft, and just mopping people up because they're like, oh shit, I didn't prepare for this much aggression. But I think in sort of like a standard played out game, it's going to be really hard for JamestheKatt to like win a war of attrition. Or even just like, doesn't even have to be versus like more stally teams, even just against like more balanced teams. I think that JamestheKatt's just going to have to like really predict very hard. Like, if you suspect someone to come in on Zard, don't click the fire move, click Solar Beam, just predict it. Just predict it every time. Because I think that's the way, like, James is going to have to blow open holes in the opponent's team. Because if that doesn't happen, and if it doesn't happen early on, I think the team might struggle a bit. Yeah, and like setup wise, I think Rabombi is a good setup. I think it doesn't have like your more conventional setup guys with like, you know, your car, like with your Swords Dance or your nasty plots, things like that. But I think Petron and Suicune, even if they don't set up all the time, I think they could be quite disastrous for certain opponents. I think Petron's quite polarizing. It has good matchups, it has some bad matchups. In good matchups though, I think that it can really like sort of help carry some of the frailer guys across the line, because it will provide the necessary chip for maybe like a Dom to just come in and maybe get like one flinch and then just win the game from there. So yeah, on that, I do think this team has its chances. It's quite aggressive. I think it could definitely pull things out, but I don't trust the reliability of the team. So for that reason, I think I put it here. What was Vicky's team again? I think maybe Vicky's team is slightly more well-rounded, but I think JamestheKatt has more chance of like winning certain games just because of how aggressive it is. If that makes sense. Like you might just win because you set up webs and then Zard wires there, and then someone doesn't have an appropriate counter for it. So yeah, I think that's sort of how I feel about that. Yeah, in terms of the ordering, I think the C tier is fine ordered. I think the B tier, like you can make a case for this as well. I think I just have personal bias towards Goose's team. I just feel like I kind of like the look of it. I feel it's more like well-rounded than Moose and Slams, but Moose and Slams is a bit more explosive perhaps, which is sort of counterintuitive to why I put JamestheKatt above Vicky here. But I think as you go up the tiers, consistency is more important. As for the top teams, we had Times' team. It's quite strong. It's just like nicely well-rounded. I think that Team Kanave's team is perhaps a bit more defensive in nature. Like it can definitely stall games out. It has like a lot of backup plans. But it can also do like some aggressive things as well, which I quite like. Connor and Cheese, you've got like all the guys that sort of are trying to facilitate Kyurem's success, but like some typing issues that I mentioned. And then Kivs and Lucas's team, I think. I think that maybe what I would say. So just take a look at Kivs and Lucas's team again. Yeah, I feel like that's gonna be like it just feels very well rounded, offensively and defensively. I think that I might say something like this. But I do think that maybe it's a... Yeah, I think that it's maybe something like this. I think Times' team is like also quite well-rounded, just maybe not as well-rounded as how I feel Kivs and Lucas's is. I feel like it lacks like a good enough Z captain, like I said. The speed tiers, there's a bit of a drop off. And defensively it's good, but maybe not like S tier good type of thing. I think that Team Kanave is maybe just a bit more consistent on that front in terms of like if something goes awry, they have a lot of backup plans. Connor and Cheese don't have quite as many backup plans, and like it's going to be difficult to, like, if they get on the back foot, it might be difficult to recover. But I think that their team is built around Curum, and I always find that when teams like, even if they have like maybe bigger weaknesses than other teams in the division, in terms of like maybe like typing, things like that, I think when you just create like a cohesive team profile, it always leads to good success. So yeah, I think that that is probably how I'd rate it for Armarouge. Yeah, if anyone watched the whole thing, appreciate it. If you just watched your own part, also appreciate that. And also let me know if like this style of PRs is like better or worse, because I'll either do it or not do it going forward. So yeah.